Welcome back, beautiful people. Today's story is equal parts drama and devotion, and trust us, you'll be hooked from the very first line. Asterisk, before we dive into the story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more heart-touching tales. Wishing you a beautiful day now, sit back and enjoy the story. Asterisk, the ivory silk gown felt like a shroud now. Emma Sinclair stood frozen in the chapel doorway. Her grandmother's hand-sewn lace sleeves suddenly too tight against her trembling arms. The weight of 200 pairs of eyes pressed against her chest as James's words echoed through the vaulted space like a death knell. I cannot marry Emma because I am in love with someone else. The chapel's stained glass windows cast fractured rainbows across the marble floor where her bouquet lay scattered. White peonies crushed beneath the feet of guests who had risen from their pews to get a better view of her destruction. The sweet fragrance of the flowers mixed with the bitter taste of copper in her mouth as she bit down on her tongue to keep from screaming. Victoria stepped forward, one hand pressed to her still flat stomach, emerald bridesmaid dress rustling like autumn leaves, her best friend since childhood. The girl who had helped her pick out this very dress, who had held her hair while she threw up from wedding nerves just that morning. I'm so sorry, Emma. We never meant for this to happen. The chapel erupted. Voices rose like a murder of crows, sharp and cutting. Someone laughed. Actually laughed. The sound sliced through Emma's chest and lodged itself between her ribs, making each breath feel like swallowing glass. Phone screens glowed throughout the congregation, recording, capturing every second of her humiliation for the hungry. Algorithm gods of social media. By tonight, she would be viral for all the wrong reasons. The girl who got left at the altar, the naive little princess who believed in fairy tales. Her father's hand found her elbow, his weathered fingers shaking, 63 years old, and he had spent his life savings on this day. It's the day that was supposed to be perfect. The day that was supposed to be the beginning of everything beautiful. Emma tried to speak, to salvage something from the wreckage, but her throat had closed like a fist. The chapel walls seemed to lean inward, the Gothic arches becoming cage bars. The autumn sunlight that had seemed so romantic an hour ago now felt like a spotlight, harsh and unforgiving. Another burst of laughter from the back row. A woman's voice, honeyed with false sympathy. Poor little Emma. She always was too good to be true. That's when the voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. That is enough. The chapel fell silent so quickly that Emma could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Every head turned toward the back pews where a man stood like a pillar of controlled fury. Tall, imposing, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than her father's car. His presence seemed to expand and fill the sacred space, commanding attention without effort. Adrian Blackstone. She knew the name from her father's nervous mentions over dinner. The billionaire who had somehow ended up on their guest list through a business connection. The man who could buy and sell their entire wedding with his pocket change. His dark eyes swept the congregation with the cold efficiency of a predator cataloging prey. When that gaze found the laughing guests, they shrank back into their seats like scolded children. When it found James, her former fiancé, actually took a step backward. But when those eyes found Emma, something shifted. The predatory coldness softened into something she couldn't name. Something that made her breath catch for entirely different reasons. Adrian walked down the center aisle with measured steps, his expensive shoes clicking against marble like a countdown. The crowd parted before him, as if he were Moses approaching the Red Sea. When he reached Emma, he stopped just close enough that she could smell his cologne, cedar and smoke, and something darker underneath. He extended one hand toward her. A gesture of pity or condescension, but an offering. It's an escape route, Miss Sinclair, he said, his voice low and rich as aged whiskey. Would you do me the honor of allowing me to escort you out of here? Emma stared at his outstretched hand. Manicured nails, a platinum watch that caught the stained glass light, a thin scar across his knuckles that spoke of violence in his past. This man was dangerous. She could feel it radiating from him like heat from a forge. But dangerous might be exactly what she needed right now. The chapel held its breath as Emma made her choice. Emma placed her trembling hand in his. The moment their skin touched, electricity shot up her arm like lightning seeking ground. Adrian's fingers were warm and steady, a stark contrast to the ice water flowing through her veins. He closed his hand around hers with the gentleness of someone who understood exactly how fragile things could be. "Trust me," he murmured, and somehow she did. Together they walked down the center aisle, past the gawking faces and glowing phone screens. Emma kept her chin raised, drawing strength from the solid presence beside her. His hand on hers felt like an anchor in a storm that threatened to tear her apart. The chapel doors swung shut behind them with a sound like finality. The October air hit her exposed shoulders like a slap, raising goosebumps along her arms. The reception tent stood in the distance, white fabric billowing in the wind like a ghost. $250 per plate. Gone. Her parents' retirement fund. Gone. Her future? Gone. "I can't breathe," she whispered, her hand flying to her throat where the delicate necklace her mother had given her that morning now felt like a noose. Adrian studied her face with those dark eyes that seemed to see too much. Without a word, he shrugged out of his suit jacket and draped it around her shoulders. The fabric still held his body heat and that intoxicating scent of cedar and danger. "You're in shock," he said matter-of-factly. "We need to get you somewhere private before you collapse." A black Bentley waited at the curb, engine purring like a sleeping panther. The driver, a mountain of a man with kind eyes, jumped out to open the door. Emma hesitated. Getting into a car with a stranger, even one who had just rescued her, seemed like the kind of mistake naive girls made in cautionary tales. But what choice did she have? Go back inside and face the cameras? Drive home to the house where James's things still sat in boxes marked our new beginning? She slid into the leather interior, and Adrian followed. The door closed with a whisper, sealing them into a cocoon of luxury and silence. The car began to move, carrying her away from the wreckage of her perfect day. "Where are we going?" she asked. "My hotel." "You need somewhere to think, and I suspect you'd prefer to avoid your apartment right now." He was right. James had a key. Victoria had a key. Everyone would want to comfort her, or worse, get the inside story for their social media feeds. But thought of facing anyone right now made her stomach churn. The hotel was everything she expected from a man like Adrian Blackstone. Glass and steel reaching toward the clouds, doormen in uniforms that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Marble floors so polished she could see her reflection staring back up at her. His penthouse suite took up the entire top floor, floor to ceiling. Windows offered a panoramic view of the city below, lights beginning to twinkle as evening approached. Emma walked to the glass, still wrapped in his jacket, and pressed her forehead against the cool surface. "Why?" she asked, without turning around. "Why? What? Why did you help me? You don't know me. This isn't your problem." She heard the clink of crystal and turned to see him pouring amber liquid into 2 glasses. Whiskey, probably older than she was and worth more than her car. "I've been where you are," he said simply, offering her one of the glasses. Maybe not exactly, but close. "Enough." Emma took a sip and gasped as the whiskey burned its way down her throat, warming her from the inside. "Someone humiliated you at your wedding?" Something dark flickered across his features. "Someone I trusted destroyed everything I cared about. In public? For sport?" He took a long drink, his jaw tight. "I know what it feels like to have your world end while people watch and take pictures." The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. This man who commanded rooms with his presence, who made grown men step aside with a look, had been broken too. What happened to them? The person who betrayed you? Adrian's smile was sharp as broken glass. "I destroyed them completely, systematically. They lost everything that mattered to them, just like they took everything that mattered to me." The venom in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it sent a thrill through her chest. The idea of James and Victoria facing consequences for what they'd done, for the public spectacle they'd made of her humiliation, was intoxicating. "I want that," she heard herself say. "I want them to pay." Adrian set down his glass and moved closer, close enough that she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "Revenge is expensive," he said softly. What are you willing to sacrifice for it? Emma thought of the video clips that were probably already spreading across the internet. The screenshots that would follow her for years, the pitying looks and whispered conversations, the way her parents had aged 10 years in the span of 10 minutes as they watched their daughter's dreams implode. Everything, she whispered. Everything is a dangerous word, Emma. Are you sure you mean it? His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. She leaned into the touch, starved for kindness after the cruelty she'd endured. Yes, she breathed. That's when he kissed her. It wasn't gentle or hesitant. It was fire and fury and hunger all rolled into one devastating moment. His mouth moved against hers like he was claiming something that belonged to him, like he was marking territory. Emma melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as everything else fell away. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes held a darkness that should have terrified her. Then marry me instead, he said. You're insane. Emma pulled away from him, her heart hammering against her ribs. The whiskey glass trembled in her hand, amber liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights blurred into streams of gold and red as darkness settled over the world. Adrian didn't flinch at her words. If anything, his mouth curved into something that might have been amusement if it had reached his eyes. Am I? Think about it, Emma. You want revenge against the people who humiliated you in front of 200 witnesses. I have the resources to give you that revenge. But more than that, I have the power to transform you into someone they could never touch again. He moved to his desk, a sleek piece of black marble that dominated one corner of the penthouse. When he returned, he held a thick folder bound in cream-colored leather. What is that? She asked, though part of her already knew. A marriage contract. I had my lawyers draft it while we were driving here. Emma stared at him. He had lawyers. Working on a Sunday evening to draft a marriage contract for a woman you met an hour ago? I don't do anything halfway, Emma. When I want something, I take it. The way he said her name made heat pool low in her belly, even as alarm bells rang. In her head, this man was dangerous in ways she was only beginning to understand. You don't want me, she said. You don't even know me. I know you were willing to stand at that altar and commit your life to someone who betrayed you with your best friend. I know you held your head high while people laughed at your pain. I know you taste like whiskey in desperation and something I can't name but want to devour. His voice dropped to a whisper. And I know that underneath that white dress and those proper manners, you have claws. Emma's breath caught. This is madness. Perhaps. Madness has served me well. Adrien opened the folder, revealing pages of dense legal text. This isn't a fairy tale marriage, Emma. This is a business arrangement with certain ... personal benefits. You get my name, my protection, and access to resources that will let you destroy everyone who wronged you. I get a wife who understands. That love is a luxury neither of us can afford. She forced herself to look at the contract instead of his face. The terms were laid out in clinical detail. A 2-year marriage. Separate bedrooms unless mutually agreed otherwise. Public appearances as required. Financial provisions that made her head spin. $50 million, she whispered, staring at the settlement clause. Upon dissolution of the marriage, assuming you fulfill your obligations, think of it as hazard. Pay for dealing with my world. Emma's mind reeled. $50 million. Her parents could retire comfortably. She could disappear anywhere in the world, start over completely. Never again would she have to worry about money or security or depending on someone who might betray her. What obligations? She asked. You'll be my wife in every public sense. Attend events, meet business associates, convince the world that Adrian Blackstone is capable of love. In private, he shrugged. We'll see what develops. The casual way he said it sent electricity racing through her veins. What develops? As if attraction was a foregone conclusion, as if she was already half won. Maybe she was. There has to be a catch, she said. Men like you don't hand out $50 million to random women. Adrian's smile turned predatory. Clever girl. You're right, of course. There is a catch. He moved closer, backing her against the window. The city sprawled beneath them, millions of lives playing out in the darkness below. Emma felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, one step away from falling into something she might never climb out of. My world is brutal, Emma. The people in it will try to destroy you just to see if they can. They'll dig up every secret, exploit every weakness, turn your past into a weapon against you. If you marry me, you become a target. It's more of a target than I already am. Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. The pathetic girl who got dumped at the altar? At least as your wife? I'd have power. Power, Adrian repeated, tasting the word. Yes, you would. The power to make James Patterson's construction company lose every major contract in the city. The power to ensure Victoria Cross never works in marketing again. The power to make them understand that destroying you was the worst mistake of their insignificant lives. The promise in his voice was dark and intoxicating. Emma could picture it. Being scrambling to save his family business as clients mysteriously canceled contracts. Victoria's pristine reputation crumbling as whispers followed her everywhere she went. And all I have to do is play house with you for 2 years? All you have to do is become someone they can't hurt anymore. Emma stared at the contract, her reflection ghost-like in the window behind it. The girl in the mirror looked fragile, wounded, wearing a stranger's jacket over a wedding dress that would never see its intended purpose. But there was something else in those reflected eyes, something that hadn't been there this morning. Hardness, a hunger for something more than the safe, predictable life she'd been planning with James. I need guarantees, she heard herself say. Name them, my parents. They're never to be touched, no matter what happens between us. They get protection, security, everything they need. Done. I want to review every business decision that affects the people who wronged me. I won't be a passive observer in my own revenge. Interesting. Like a woman who wants to get her hands dirty. His eyes glittered with approval, agreed. Emma took a shaky breath, and I want one night to think about this. 24 hours. Tomorrow evening, I'll give you my answer. Adrien studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. Fair enough. But Emma. He leaned close, his breath warm. Against her ear, don't mistake this for a rescue. I'm not your knight in shining armor. I'm offering you the chance to become someone who doesn't need rescuing, someone who does the destroying instead. His words sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with cold. What if I say no, and you walk away with my respect and a promise that the videos of today will disappear from the internet within hours? Will still have my protection, just not my name. It was more than she dared hope for, more than she deserved from a stranger who owed her nothing. I say yes. Adrian's smile was sharp and beautiful and terrifying. Then God help anyone who ever tries to hurt you again. As the elevator doors closed behind her 20 minutes later, Emma clutched the leather folder to her chest like a lifeline. The contract. Inside represented everything she'd never dared want. Power, security, revenge. The only question was whether she was brave enough to reach for it. Emma's apartment felt like a crime scene. 24 hours had passed since Adrian's proposal, and she stood in her living room surrounded by the detritus of her former life, wedding gifts stacked in unopened boxes. James's coffee mug still, sitting on the counter with yesterday's lipstick stain from her goodbye kiss. The engagement photos they'd planned to display at the reception, now scattered across the floor where she'd hurled them in a fit of rage. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing, reporters wanting statements, friends offering hollow condolences. Strangers on social media dissecting every moment of her humiliation frame by frame. She'd turned it off hours ago, but the phantom vibrations continued against her palm like a guilty heartbeat. The marriage contract lay open on her coffee table, every clause memorized. 2 years, $50 million. The power to remake herself into someone untouchable. A knock at the door made her freeze. Through the peephole, she saw James standing in the hallway, flowers in his hand and misery etched across his features. He looked like he hadn't slept, his usually perfect hair disheveled and his eyes red-rimmed. Against her better judgment, she opened the door. Emma, thank God. He stepped forward as if to embrace her, but stopped when she held up a hand. I've been calling you. I need to explain. Explain what, exactly? How you've been sleeping with my best friend. How long you've been lying to my face. How you let me plan our entire future while you were planning your exit strategy. James flinched as if she'd struck him. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. We never meant for you to find out that way. When did you mean for me to find out, James? After the honeymoon. After I got pregnant thinking it was your baby. Exactly would have been a good time to discover that my entire life was built on a lie. I know you're angry. Emma laughed, the sound brittle as winter ice. I'm not angry, James. I'm done. She turned to walk back into the apartment, but his next words stopped her cold. Victoria's threatening to go to the press. About you and Blackstone. Emma turned slowly. Excuse me? James's face was pale, desperate. Someone saw you leaving the chapel with him, getting into his car. The story is already spreading that you moved on pretty quickly for someone who was supposedly heartbroken. You're worried about my reputation now, Emma, please? Victoria is scared. She thinks you're going to try to ruin us, and she's talking about telling reporters that you were already having an affair. That maybe our relationship ended because you were cheating first. The sheer audacity of it stole Emma's breath. After everything they'd put her through, after the public humiliation and the betrayal, Victoria was trying to rewrite history too. Make Emma the villain. Get out, Emma said quietly. Emma, listen to me. We can fix this. Call off whatever you're planning with Blackstone. We'll all stay quiet about yesterday. Let the story die down. You can move on with your life without dragging us through the mud. Get out of my apartment, James. I know you're hurt, but don't do something you'll regret. Blackstone isn't a good man, Emma. I've heard things about him, about what he does to people who cross him. You're better than that. You're better than revenge. Emma stared at the man she'd once planned to spend her life with. The man who'd promised to love and cherish her, who'd let her parents bankrupt themselves for a wedding he never intended to go through with. The man who was now worried about facing consequences for his actions. Am I better than revenge, James? Or am I just easier to victimize when I'm being good? Something flickered in his eyes then, something that looked almost like fear. Don't do this, Emma. Whatever Blackstone promised you, it's not worth it. He'll use you and throw you away, just like he does everyone else. That's when Emma realized the truth. This wasn't about love or regret or trying to protect her from making a mistake. This was about damage control. James and Victoria were scared of what Adrian could do to them, and they were trying to manipulate her one last time. You know what, James? You're absolutely right about one thing. I am better than revenge, she smiled, and it was sharp as a blade. I'm better than the petty, small revenge you're afraid of. I'm capable of something much more comprehensive. She walked to her coffee table and picked up the marriage contract, holding it up so he could see the Blackstone Industries letterhead. I'm going to marry him tonight, and then I'm going to become someone you can't touch, can't hurt, and can't manipulate ever again. James's face went white. Emma, you don't understand what you're getting into. I understand perfectly. Getting into a life where pathetic little boys like you can't destroy me for entertainment. He'll break your heart worse than I ever could. Good, Emma said. Maybe it needs to be broken properly this time. Maybe I need to learn the difference between being loved and being managed. She walked to the door and opened it wide. Get out, and take your flowers with you. Dead things don't belong in my new life. James hesitated in the doorway. This isn't you, Emma. This cold, calculating person. This isn't who you are. You're right, she said. This isn't who I was. But it's exactly who I'm choosing to become. After he left, Emma sat in the silence of her empty apartment and dialed Adrian's number. He answered on the first ring. Have you made your decision? Yes, she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. I'll marry you. Tonight if possible. What changed your mind? Emma looked around at the wreckage of her old life. The photos of a woman who'd believed in fairy tales. The gifts from a wedding that had become a funeral for her innocence. I realized you were wrong about something, she said. Oh, what's that? You said this wasn't a rescue. But you're wrong. She stood up, shedding the last of her hesitation. Like a snake shedding its skin, it is a rescue. I'm rescuing myself. Adrian's laugh was low and approving. I'll send a car. We have a plane to catch. Where are we going? Vegas. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. By tomorrow morning, you'll be Mrs. Emma Blackstone, and your old life will officially be dead. As Emma hung up the phone, she caught sight of herself in the mirror across the room. The woman looking back at her was a stranger, harder, more dangerous. Beautiful in a way that promised consequences for anyone foolish enough to underestimate her. She liked what she saw. 6 months later, Emma Blackstone stood on the terrace of their penthouse, watching the city wake up beneath a blanket of morning mist. The platinum wedding band on her finger caught the first rays of sunlight, throwing tiny rainbows across the marble floor. She learned many things in those 6 months. How to speak 3 languages fluently. How to negotiate million-dollar deals without flinching. How to smile at people who wanted to destroy her while planning their systematic ruin. How to be married to a man who guarded his heart like a state secret while slowly, inexorably stealing hers. The transformation had been complete and merciless. Victoria Cross had indeed tried to sell her story to the tabloids, painting Emma as a gold-digging opportunist who'd used Adrian to escape her own infidelity. The story had run exactly once, before mysteriously disappearing from the internet along with Victoria's career prospects. She now worked at a small marketing firm in Toledo, filing bankruptcy papers and struggling to pay rent on a studio apartment. James had fared worse. His construction company had collapsed within 3 months as contracts evaporated and investors fled. He'd been forced to sell his house, his car, everything he'd valued. The last Emma had heard, he was working construction for his former competitors, the ones who now owned his client list. She should have felt satisfaction. Instead, she felt empty. "You're up early." Adrian's voice came from behind her, rough with sleep. She didn't turn around. Couldn't bear to see him looking rumpled and human and devastatingly beautiful in the morning light. "Couldn't sleep," she said. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. In 6 months of marriage, they'd shared exactly 3 kisses. First on their wedding night in Vegas, quick and perfunctory for the cameras. The second, at a charity gala where appearances demanded it. The third 2 weeks ago when she'd closed a deal that would net them $40 million, and he'd been so impressed, he'd kissed her right there in the boardroom. She'd been replaying that third kiss ever since. "Having second thoughts about tonight?" he asked. "Tonight?" The charity auction where James and Victoria would both be in attendance, forced to watch Emma command a room full of the city's most powerful people. The final act of her revenge, orchestrated down to the smallest detail. "No," she said. "But I've been thinking about what happens after. After tonight, they're finished, completely destroyed. And then what? On our contract, but the reason for this marriage will be gone." Adrian was quiet for so long, she finally turned to look at him. His dark eyes were studying her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Is that what you think this is about? Revenge, isn't it?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Emma, I destroyed James Patterson 3 months ago. His business was finished before Christmas. I could have done the same to Victoria in a week. You really think I needed 6 months to eliminate 2 insignificant people?" Emma stared at him. "Then why? Because somewhere along the way, I stopped caring about your ex-fiancé and started caring about you." His voice was raw, unguarded in a way she'd never heard before. "Because watching you transform yourself into someone magnificent has been the most intoxicating thing I've ever experienced. Because I've fallen in love with my own wife, and I have no idea what to do about it." The words hit her like a physical blow. In 6 months of marriage, love had never been mentioned, never even hinted at. They were business partners, conspirators, 2 broken people using each other to heal. "You don't love me," she whispered, "don't I?" He stepped closer, backing her against the terrace railing. "Then why do I lie awake at night listening to you breathe? Why do I schedule unnecessary meetings just so I can watch you work? Why did I buy out that marketing firm in Toledo just so Victoria Cross would have to choose between working for a company I own or starving on the street?" Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. "Adrian, why do I have divorce papers sitting in my desk drawer that I can't bring myself to finalize? Even though our contract expires in 18 months and you'll be free to walk away with enough money to never think about me again? Because You're a control freak who doesn't like losing, she managed. His smile was sharp and beautiful and absolutely devastating, 'cause I'm a man who's discovered that some things are more important than contracts. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing across her cheekbones with the gentleness she'd learned to crave. I'm in love with you, Emma. Desperately, completely, inconveniently in love with you. And I know that wasn't part of our deal, but I'm hoping you might be willing to renegotiate. Emma stared into his eyes, seeing vulnerability there that he'd never shown before. This man who commanded boardrooms and broke competitors for sport was standing before her, heart in his hands, asking her to choose him. What kind of renegotiation? She whispered. The kind where we tear up the contract and start over. No predetermined end date. No settlement clause. It's just a marriage between two people who've learned that love might not be a luxury after all. If I say no, then I honor our original agreement. 18 months from now, you walk away with $50 million and my blessing to find someone worthy of you. Emma thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago. Naive, trusting, willing to settle for safe love with a man who'd never truly seen her. Then she thought about the woman she'd become. Strong, dangerous, capable of anything. That woman deserved a love that was just as dangerous. I have conditions, she said. Adrian's eyes flashed with something that might have been relief. Name them. No more separate bedrooms. Done. No more business marriage. If we're doing this, we're doing it because we choose each other every day. Agreed. And no more revenge schemes without my input. If someone tries to hurt what's ours, we destroy them together. Adrian's smile was predatory and absolutely perfect. Mrs. Blackstone, I think you're going to fit into my world better than I ever imagined. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like their previous kisses. This was claiming and promise and forever, all rolled into one devastating moment. Emma melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with 6 months of pent-up longing. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she smiled against his mouth. So what happens tonight? Tonight we make one final public appearance as the couple who destroyed everyone who wronged them. And tomorrow, we start over as the couple who chose love over revenge. And James and Victoria? Adrian's expression turned cold. They ceased to matter. Irrelevant people in a story that was never really about them. Emma looked out over the city, then back at the man who'd saved her by teaching her to save herself. The man who'd offered her revenge and given her something infinitely more valuable. The chance to become someone worthy of the love she'd always deserved. I love you too, she said. Just so you know, his smile could have powered the entire city. I was hoping you'd say that. As the sun rose fully above the skyline, painting the world in shades of gold and possibility, Emma Blackstone stood in her husband's arms and realized that sometimes the best revenge was simply becoming two. Happy to care about the people who'd tried to destroy you. Sometimes the best revenge was living well. Asterisks like this video. If the story touched your heart, subscribe for more emotional tales and share with someone who believes in the power of true love, and let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers. Asterisk. Don't forget to, like if this story gave you all the feels. Subscribe for more addictive love stories. Share with someone who needs a good cry hit. The bell for notifications on new uploads. Thank you for watching. Your support means everything to us. The end.